American Military University proudly presents Mission San Diego Military, produced by the San Diego Military Advisory Council and Cloudcast Media. San Diego is America's finest military city. From the Marines and Navy to the Coast Guard and Naval Special Warfare, San Diego is a proud military town. Mission San Diego Military will help you better understand how the San Diego military leads, innovates, and cares for community and country. Mission San Diego Military, co-hosted by the CEO of the San Diego Military Advisory Council, retired Rear Admiral David Boone, and Drew Schlossberg with Cloudcast Media, begins right now.
I'm Drew Schlossberg with Cloudcast Media. You're listening to another edition of Mission San Diego Military, brought to you by American Military University. They've been doing great things leading in education for families in the military since 1993. My co-host is David Boone. He is the President and CEO of the San Diego Military Advisory Council.
Great to be with you again.
Absolutely, better known as SDMAC. David is a retired Navy Rear Admiral, and the Mission San Diego Military Podcast is brought to you by Cloudcast Media. Why don't you introduce our guests?
Well, we have two really great guests and critical partners with SDMAC. We've been talking about for the last couple of episodes the creation of this defense innovation ecosystem, which is really, we have a great opportunity in San Diego. We have the intersection of world-class universities. We just had interviews in our last session with representatives from SDSU and UC San Diego. We have the largest military concentration in the world. And then we have entrepreneurial investors and doers, and that's what this session's about. So Pete Mirisola, and he's going to talk more about Saab, not the car company, but Scapa, how they have transformed what they're doing. And then Jake Windle from Harpoon Investments and how they are picking and choosing, selecting, investing in this industry. So it's going to be a fun show.
Yeah, let me start with you on this. So Jake, basically the mission of Harpoon is to invest. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, we have several different ways to do that, but we're early in the capital stack, so pre-seed and seed stage companies. So we try to find entrepreneurs at the outset of their entrepreneurial journey and invest in them to help them get started, do their critical initial hires. And then one of my big jobs at Harpoon is also helping them go to market and find initial partners that the risk profile of those initial DoD partners matches the phase of the company, and then help them find new partners as we de-risk the technology and go more toward the productization and go-to-market side of the cycle.
Right. Has there been an emphasis on the military or innovation in the military, or not necessarily?
There was from the beginning with us. Like my general partner Larson started Harpoon Ventures in 2018, and he started it as a private sector balance to what In-Q-Tel was doing in the commercial sector for DoD in the federal side. And he thought there should be a private sector version of that provided private capital and links to follow-on private capital the whole way through the capital stack, from early instantiation of the company to late-stage IPOing with the big traditional banks. And he founded us as a way to, provide that insight from venture capital side of investing. So I say all that to say that we don't really focus on the DoD side too much, but there's this sort of correlation now in between private sector technology development and what gets funded and what doesn't get funded, and how that applies to DoD platforms like the Saab Scapa platform, and that tries to bring innovative new things into these platforms as quickly as possible. And the best way to do that is the fast iterative cycles of the venture capital backed technology community.
So you should ask Jake what he did in the military.
Jake, what did you not do in the military?
So I'm a retired Master Chief. I retired in 2020 out of the NSW formation.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I focused on EW and SIGINT-based manhunting inside the Special Reconnaissance teams in NSW and the SEAL teams before that.
Nice. Pete, were you in the military?
I was. I spent 30 years in the Navy as a service warfare officer.
Yeah, and where were you? All over?
All over. Yeah, about a third of my career on the West Coast, about a third on the East Coast, and then a third in the Middle East, actually.
Oh, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, very, very good. So Director for Autonomy, I love it. I think this is the first Director of Autonomy I've ever interviewed on the show. How long have you been in that position?
Almost 2 years now.
2 years,
Yep.
right.
I retired from active duty, and Saab hired me almost immediately.
And why autonomy? First of all, it's a great title.
Yeah, I see the autonomy world as really the confluence of both very bespoke and powerful software, such as the artificial intelligence tools and machine learning tools that we have, meeting hardware, making things uncrewed or unmanned systems do the things that they need to do. So you have to have a technical depth in both software applications and then hardware creation, hardware sustainment. So it's a very exciting field to be in.
Well, obviously, with all the UASs, unmanned air systems, unless you can't turn around and not know what's going on, and that thing exploding at exponential,
Literally,
levels.
in some cases, exploding. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Not intentionally, I imagine. And that aspect of it. Was that your background? I mean, even before you got into the Navy?
No, I went right out of university into the Navy. So really my technical background is born out of my experience in the Navy, both with radar-based systems, fire control systems, electronic warfare systems, and of course advanced weapons and missile systems. So.
Yeah, it was something I'd love saying on this show and other one as well. David's heard me say it probably to ad nauseum, but one more time won't make David too sick on this. When I chat with folks about, when these 18 and 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, and their know-how on handling $35 zillion machines and what they have to do, you're in good hands in this aspect of it. And I think a lot of folks, the lay public, doesn't realize that. I'm not sure how they can not realize that. What an absolute great, stretch that is, and in this area.
Well, you look at what happens on an aircraft carrier, and you can YouTube it. But all the different color shirts on the flight deck, they're mostly 20-year-olds that are running around in a choreographed fashion. So we expect a lot of our young military people, regardless of service, and they operate high-tech things. And these gentlemen have managed crews of those people to choreograph the actions of what has to happen. So, it's eye-watering.
And as we've been chatting about with some of your colleagues in previous, episodes about it, is there enough of a workforce that we are producing either in our K-12 schools or our community colleges or in the four-year schools that can meet the need of what you folks need? I'll start with you on that, Pete.
Nationwide, I think there is a deficit. San Diego is so unique. That is why my particular company, Saab, decided to set up our tech innovation and incubator hub here in San Diego because of the access to a talented and diverse workforce. And the great academic institutions that Admiral Boone had mentioned earlier. So in San Diego, I think we're unique in that we can tap into that talent quite easily. But the federal government is also recognizing that you can't be static in your learning and in your developing of that workforce. For instance, the military, most services now are looking at military occupational specialties that have to do with operating remote or uncrewed systems. Certainly the Navy stood up a new enlisted rating about a year ago to try to harness the power of training and educating and going through the professional development of those sailors. And then eventually, like the three sailors you have before you, we all get out of uniform at some point, whether you're a one-time enlistee or you spend a career. And then how do we translate those skills and experiences from our uniform service into the high-tech fields that San Diego is known for?
One of the themes that we've been hearing all day on this focus on innovation, David, has been speed to market, so forth. Talk about that, David.
Yeah,
so we live in a different world than how our procurement system originated post World War II into the Cold War, where we had a consistent adversary. Now we live in a completely different world of we don't know who our adversary is half the time, can't see them, can't feel them, and so we have to react and be able to respond in a more agile way. So that we're in a changing system right now. We haven't figured it out. And as we talked about earlier, Ukraine was forced into figuring that out on the fly, where they were literally transforming their drones overnight by bringing the operators together with the manufacturers and cycling a new system out the next day. We're not there. And so these gentlemen are part of that ecosystem. One of the things I wanted to ask Jake is, from his standpoint, a lot of it is management of risk when you make investments. So how do you think about risk assessment? What do you look for, and how do you make choices when it comes to investments?
Okay, we'll try to unpack that a little bit. It's a multi-stage effort that really involves the whole team inside of Harpoon. It's a small team, about 9 people full-time, but our investment team is about 6 of us, and that means we were agile enough to make fast decisions. And we've got the team is divided up into basically some former investment guys, some recovering investment banker types that are brilliant in their financial modeling, their analysis of market trends, sensitivity analysis, moving forward with different market trends and different market responses to new product rollouts. They do a really good job with that. One of my main roles in that stage, the very initial stages of analyzing risk and analyzing size of the market, is to figure out the potential for a specific technology in DoD. We don't make investment decisions based on pure DoD upside. Most of the time, we've got 70 companies in the portfolio. I think 6 or 7 of them are pure DoD plays. The rest have a big commercial market that's going to feed that money into that innovation cycle. And then if we do our job correctly, then we're allowing DoD to ride that innovation wave, that J curve, before it starts to go parabolic. And we get to make sure that DoD gets more value than one for one. So they're not paying dollar for dollar for innovation.
So do you purposely try to select technologies that have a dual use?
It helps for sure. It helps in our calculus. We want technologies that are going to return the entire fund. So if I have a $100 million fund, I write $2 million checks. I want to make a $2 million investment, and I want to get a 50x return to make sure that it returns the entire fund. That's what we're looking at. And if there's also a DoD use case that, again, it's very niche what we do and in the technology stacks that we operate in. But I think we've done a really good job of carving that up into our own little expert area where we can understand if we take this to market in DoD, again, they get to pay 10 cents on the dollar to ride this innovative wave. And it's all about timing.
How do you know when a startup comes to you that their cool thing is something that DoD is really going to need and use?
It's a great question. A lot of it's based on experience. Pete talked about his 30 years of experience and his exposure to all these different angles of technologies and integration potential. And that with that comes relationships, right? So Pete has amazing relationships across the Navy. We know that firsthand. Same with me as a retired Master Chief. And we enjoy really good relationships because we try to be, at Harpoon, we try to be honest brokers in this realm. So we don't just talk our book exclusively, meaning we don't show up to meetings and just say, hey, DoD, you should invest in this because we just wrote them a check. As a matter of fact, a lot of our go-to-market motions are with non-portfolio companies because we go to a meeting and we see somebody that's interested in a specific thing. We know that we can operationalize something that we saw. We can help operationalize a technology we saw and that we passed on for whatever reason because it wasn't a good fit, or we're conflicted out or some other reason, and we still align those DoD resource sponsors or budget owners with that new technology because we know it solves a need and we know it's going to make the guys that we left behind in service safer and more lethal, and that's why we got into this gig in the first place.
I want to ask Pete, as you think about innovation, what's your drumbeat in terms of engaging the end user? How do you do that? How often do you do that? How much do they play in the development of your innovative ideas? I know you have a Swedish term, I forget what it is, for innovating or thinking different.
It's actually the name of our organization here in San Diego. Skapa is a Swedish word that means to create, to make, or to shape. And that's the name we chose to really get at our roots as innovators and good partners in the defense tech ecosystem here in San Diego, and either creates a novel product or take an existing product and make it better, whether through its traditional engineering practices or advanced software applications.
That's part of the reason why I'll jump in on your
please.
Feed there, Pete, or frequency hopping as we call it in the military. But that's part of the reason why we kept Harpoon Ventures here in San Diego after Larson left the military. When I came on board, there's always a pull in different directions. The gravity associated with a hub for hardware, like we see in El Segundo, a burgeoning ecosystem there, or software up in the Bay Area. But we kept Harpoon in San Diego because of proximity to the customer and the closest to the problem set. Like, these guys live that problem set every single day. Pete was on his ship every single day. We just had a former ship driver, post-command guy who's going to a staff job in the Navy in our office today talking about, he said, I know nothing about acquisition, but I know you guys do. And I know you guys have figured out how to angle things correctly. And as we set up this new program, how do I take advantage of that, all those lessons learned? And we told him we really, we have some knowledge internal, of course, but really we set up these interactions like you're talking about as often as possible between folks that are living this every single day. So we get operator feedback, and if we give them a prototype to use for something, that's a bottom-up demand signal. And then we've got really good relationships with the top that we discuss all the time at some of these syscoms or combatant commands or other, like Pacific Fleet here. And then we get that top-down pressure that commanders understand, hey, my guys on the ground want this. It's demonstrably better at a lower cost than what they already have. And we kind of pincher movement, squeeze the resource guys in the middle, and they have to shoot out money and contracts for a lot of these things. And it doesn't always work, but it's a pretty good method that we developed over time to make sure that we get that customer feedback close to the problem. And then we bring the commander in over the top to say, why don't we have this everywhere all the time? Good question, sir. And then that inherent pressure really hits the staff to make something happen.
Once they see a good thing, I want
they know
more.
Then everybody's a Patriots fan when they're headed to the Super Bowl.
And David, outside of the traditional federal acquisition system, what the approach we've taken here is really increasing company-funded internal research and development to work with the government customer. Oftentimes, there is no direct line to a program or record, so the industry has to put skin in the game. They have to invest company dollars to develop a program that a government customer is willing to partner with industry to again develop. So, an example, I have a cooperative research and development agreement with a government customer. Saab's part of it is completely funded by Saab very heavily. So those are internal research dollars that what the government gets out of our spend is knowledge and the demonstration of the industry team, because Saab is not the only partner in this particular endeavor. But that's how we get in front of the customer and understand their needs and work by, through, and with the customer. And if things aren't going right, the customer says so. That's horrible. Why did you do this? You should do that. That's a capability I didn't ask for. I don't need that. But here's another a void that we need to fill. So it's this continuous iteration and being informed by the customer of what they need prior to solicitation of a contract. So, not just Saab, but many companies are spending untold millions of dollars of company money just to help develop a particular product for the military.
My first PCS, when I came back to stateside, we were so stressed out. Everything was just thrown at us. And I wish I could just go back and tell past me, like, hey, it's going to be fine. Go with the flow.
I'm Drew Schlosberg with Cloudcast Media. You're listening to another edition of Mission San Diego Military, brought to you by the American Military University. I've been leading and educating our military and family since 1993, joined by Pete Mirisola, Director for Autonomy for Saab, and by his colleague Jake Windle from Harpoon Investments, joined by my colleague, co-host David Boone, President and CEO of SDMAC. Question for both of you guys. I mean, understatement in the world, you are metric guys, to say the least. So I'll start with you on this, Pete. How much are you going back and evaluate those decisions you make? Is this a constant 24/7, 365? Was this the right decision we made, or how do we know our money is going the right way in this?
It is almost near constant, but then it does align to our corporate budget cycles.
Right.
But as we see tectonic leaps in capability about every 4 to 6 months, it drives you to reevaluate your strategy about every 4 to 6 months, which is something kind of unheard of in the defense sector, going back to the McNamara era, right? Like it is a completely a new day. And there are so many bespoke technologies that are coming out, that things like Jake was talking about. In fact, we had the 30 seconds together in the lobby, and Jake and I spend a lot of time together. And usually in those little sound bites, it's, hey, have you heard of Company X? I just talked to Company Y. You should check these guys out. And things are happening at such a rapid pace that it does kind of take the ecosystem to help foster and kind of big brother or big sister these smaller tech companies along, and also that information sharing. And maybe it's not a good fit for my company, but it's a great fit for one of Jake's companies, or vice versa. So that is happening on a constant basis. I mean, we're either on the phone or email contact daily, trading notes. So that it happens.
You have to. These development cycles happen so quick in the startup world, and that's one of the inherent strengths of using these. One of the inherent strengths and the inherent pressures of the startup world, utilizing those to fill some of the inherent gaps in the DoD early stage development world, because they don't incentivize early stage performers to iterate quickly. They're just basing their decisions on a requirements document that might or might not have been developed this fiscal year, usually not, before it makes it through the JSIDs or SOFSIDs process. And we're seeing a lot of great leadership from the current administration, Secretary Hegseth, saying, hey, let's do away with this old PPBE model, the McNamara era model, and go to a portfolio approach where we have the freedom of maneuver inside of a key portfolio, that we can stop with an investment that turns out to be a bad investment and turn on a new technology with those same dollars in that same fiscal year, because it's just an obviously better decision, instead of the current process, which you could figure out that something was obsolescent, 2 years into a 4-year contract, and then you have to wait those last 2 years until it's recompeted, and it's very difficult. Or you start the requirements process again, which again, there's no real incentive to do that internal. So it's about aligning those incentives. Who's doing this stuff anyway? The venture-backed companies are, because they're venture-backed, and that inherent pressure there to make your anchor customer very happy and do whatever they need you to do, and to provide bigger bang for the buck that DoD is paying for, is one of the core components of why we love working in the startup world. And you can these young kids, like you said, the 18, 19, 20-year-old, I don't know where some of them come from. They're like aliens.
When I was 18, I was just trading baseball cards, for God's sake, or
and
whatever.
Their capacity for understanding and learning new things is even outpaced by their capacity for work. They grind. We co-hosted Stanford DEF CON a couple of weeks ago. Harpoon did, and we had these PhD 22-year-old genius kids there that are there working 12, 16-hour days and not resting on their laurels. They're grinding it out to get as much knowledge in their brains as they possibly can to inform these decisions of what they're going to spend out next. And then we think that, the least we can do is try to help them figure out a good landing spot for some of those technologies in DoD.
Well, and as you mentioned earlier, Jake, you got folks like, Pete on top of his game with his experience. You've got a sort of an A team. You have 6 on the investment team of you folks. So, but it's got to be tough. There's so many of these opportunities, as Pete was saying. This thing is just changing so fast. Do you ever think, boy, what am I missing out here?
All the time. Yeah, and we do miss deals all the time. That's just
I'm not sure how you can do so much of it. And
that's the nature of the business, and a lot of it's based on how big your portfolio is too. How big of a chunk of money do you manage? What's your assets under management? At the $300 or $400 million mark, you can't afford to spend $100 million on one all-in bet on an Anduril, for example, right? You just can't. You have to get to those companies when they're very early in their formation stage, so you can meet your ownership goals for $1 million or $2 million. And then the power law eventually kicks in after 50 or 60 investments. And a couple of those will return the fund, and the rest of them will, putter along or go to zero. We've done a pretty good job, I would like to say, without patting myself on the back, of deciding what is some of these frontier technologies that, from a DoD perspective, the DoD hasn't realized that they're coming down the pipe yet. And DoD's famous for this, right? We don't see these trends coming, and then we overreact and dump a bunch of money into the ecosystem through congressional appropriations. And then the only companies that have a big enough headspace on their contract to accept those dollars are the big primes. And we just perpetuate the cycle of spending more money to get further behind. And we try to fill that gap at the front end of that. So these small companies that don't have the ability to hire a lobbying firm to go to market for them in DoD can still bat or punch way above their weight when it comes to getting their technology in front of the right folks early, before those 4, 5, 6 year investment decisions are made. So they're on the front end of that and can inform those decisions.
In the last year, I've seen a lot of foreign delegations come to San Diego. The Aussies have been here. Of course, we have the AUKUS agreement for the audience. Australia, UK, US, has an agreement to forward deploy submarines in the Western Pacific out of Perth, Australia, that led to technology agreements. So they've been here. 2 weeks ago, I had a German delegation. Of course, Scapa is a Swedish company. On Monday, I have a Japanese delegation. How do you manage foreign engagement from a national security standpoint? Is that an issue in your space or not? The European countries seem to have stepped up their interests through NATO, through the NATO lens. And, of course, Asian countries in the Western Pacific obviously have an interest with the west coast of the United States for those reasons. How do you see that play out?
I can take a stab at this, working for what ultimately is a foreign headquarters part of our company. But I work with Saab Inc., which is the U.S. subsidiary of Saab AB, our parent company in Sweden. So at Saab Inc., we are beholden to follow both foreign ownership and control policies, FOCI, as well as the international trafficking in arms regulations. So I deal with this matter every day. Saab Inc., we are a wholly owned, separate legal entity from our parent company that operates under a special security agreement with the U.S. federal government to be able to do defense-type work. So there are a myriad of different rules and regulations we have to follow, and every phone call or contact, we have to be transparent and auditable.
Yes.
Both from a corporate audit standpoint, and we can get audited not only for financials but also our security protocols by the federal government. So we have to deal with that every day, and then we talk to companies that are going to be in our supply chain that might be foreign. We have to vet those companies like we're vetting ourselves almost to make sure when we go to purchase a particular item and put it into a Saab component that we understand both the physical pedigree and also now what's even harder is the digital pedigree, the digital DNA inside the software in some of those products, because you could go to a specific supplier and buying a piece of hardware, but I guarantee you 9 times out of 10 there's a chip of some sort in there with code. How do you understand where that code came from? Because industry relies on open source code quite a bit because you can rapidly iterate and produce code. Well, a strand of code may have, dozens of contributors to it. So how do you know it's not a contributor on a ban list or originating from a country that is also deemed not appropriate? So understanding both the physical and the digital world of what you're buying from a security standpoint, and this goes beyond, hey, it's the IT department's problem. No,
right.
It's everybody's problem from the CEO all the way down.
Right.
So you have to understand, and really that is PhD level work for folks to do and understand. But it is vitally, vitally critical because again, if we're really transitioning to digitally defined and software-based warfare, you have to be able to talk through where all that code came from and who contributed, what it's going to do, potential vulnerabilities that exist, and how you're going to mitigate those.
Mm-hmm. When I hear these things, he brought up something funny, but it's everyone's responsibility. We used to do many moons ago a cybersecurity show, and this is when people didn't. We're going to give it to Joe Blow. He knows how to use the computer, so he's in charge of cybersecurity. Really? That's what you're going to rely on? I mean, hopefully we're past that now, where everybody knows that one boo-boo, and you've just sat there and launched some missile to somewhere else in this aspect. Listen, your stories are so compelling. I know there's some folks in our audience who are going to go, I want to work with Jake, or I want to work with Pete. If those folks who want to take this sort of path to work with a Harpoon, where do they go? How do they do this? Obviously, your experience in the military is something that was quite well. Also, this helped.
Yeah, I think I got lucky. I met Larson when he was an officer in the SEAL teams, and he's a top shelf competitor in all aspects. He was a 2-time Olympian before he went to the SEAL teams, and then he went to the Stanford GSB. Like he's one of those guys who makes all the good decisions. So we give him a hard time about that. We have a good enlisted officer balance there, and the chief's mess in the office there. But I think work with Harpoon, if from a consumer perspective, that's easy. We do all the reach out there. From a company perspective, that companies that want to be a part of the ecosystem, maybe pitch us for investment. We have a pretty active presence on LinkedIn through Harpoon VC and our internal accelerator called Black Flag, where companies that want to work specifically in the defense tech space but don't know how even to start, which a lot of companies don't even know how to start looking. They want to spin out their idea out of a current company. They have no idea where to find product market fit, who to talk to in DoD, how does funding work and all that. Our accelerator Black Flag provides those kind of wraparound services. Even if we don't invest, we've gotten 800 applications over the first fiscal quarter that we had this accelerator open. We made 6 investments, but the rest of the companies that we know have great things to offer the defense market will still make the important connections for them to their initial customers, for them to decide whether this is a market they want to go after or not. At least they know. Now they're making an informed decision as opposed to just not knowing. And Larson says it all the time. We can evaluate risk. We can't evaluate uncertainty. It's really hard when you just don't know the aspects there. I think as a commander, you probably deal with the same type of stuff where you can evaluate risk as long as it's defined pretty effectively and described the right way. You can evaluate it and then mitigate it and then make sure it's below the acceptable threshold. But outside of that, if it's just uncertainty, then it's really hard. And we try to provide that for some of the portfolio companies through our Black Flag Accelerator.
That's great.
I would also add, whether it's an individual wanting to get into the defense tech space or a small startup, come to San Diego, come to the ecosystem, be an active contributing member. It is kind of a club. I mean, it's the same companies with the same leadership. We're at many of the same events together. And if we're not at an event, we're talking. So, come to San Diego, or come to California too. Between San Diego and the Bay Area, we have the world's best defense tech ecosystem on the planet. And whether it's creative minds thinking of new things, or you can go to the LA area where a lot of defense tech manufacturing is still happening. Although we don't have large shipyards in California or in the LA area anymore, you go around Torrance, they're building parts for aerospace, they're building parts for autonomous systems, they're in advanced manufacturing, they're into material sciences. You come down to San Diego, beyond just the defense tech ecosystem, you also have blue tech, so a lot of that technology is dual use and clean ocean. So I would say come to California, come to San Diego, be an active participant, join the club, and doors open.
We've talked about this before, Drew, and all other aspects of this community, how collaborative we are, and it's no different in defense tech. They help each other out. They work on where one company might be strong or weak in certain areas. They make up for it and with other partners. So it's an amazing collaborative environment we're in. So,
yeah, and San Diego sort of has that reputation. We have some reputation that isn't too good. Sometimes it takes us like 4 billion hours to make a decision on things. But and Pete's smiling on that. However, we are very collaborative, and it comes down to this relationships. I mean, anyone who spends any time in San Diego knows we're the smallest big town in the history of humankind. The 8th largest city in the country. You would never know that. And the aspect of it. And one of the things that we've always appreciated, David and I have talked about this. You got good relationships in this community. Then, Jake reaches out and says, "Hey, blah blah blah. Can you make an introduction in 1 second?" You're cutting through every single, person to get right to the top, and you just saved yourself 7 months of doing that. And I imagine that's the same thing because in that aspect of it. We've asked this of the other groups today, so we'll start on this one too. What would you say I'll start with you on this, Pete, and think about it, Jake, on your end. Some of the biggest challenges that are you and your company are facing, or are there?
I would say I do spend a lot of time in D.C., and usually the number one topic that comes up is the federal acquisition regulations. And Jake alluded to what the current administration is doing to kind of not remove everything, but just reduce the barriers, flatten, right? Because sometimes, bureaucracy with a capital B is a good thing, right? Yes. Where it just, there has to be some structure in a process. But if it gets out of control, then it doesn't serve anyone. So I would say, acquisition reform, being able to tie dollars to programs more quickly, And then here, within the local and state community, I work with David quite a bit on the things he's proposing to Sacramento.
Right.
So at a state level, to lower the barriers of entry for companies to come here or companies that are here to expand and innovate, because everyone ties this back to Washington, D.C., because it's defense. So it's a Pentagon problem and it's a federal budget problem. Well, when the money's turned on and starts flowing, it becomes a local and state problem. So the money can come, but it can't be executed because the barriers to entry within your city, county, or the state of California become prohibitively high. So it's really engaging with the governor and his staff, the state legislature in Sacramento, to identify those niche areas where we can lower those barriers, spur economic development, reinforce that great talented workforce that we talk about, provide incentives for companies to come or expand here. I think that's really the key for our future.
Yeah, and that takes, or at least we'll speak about San Diego's local Congress folks to get involved in that. And correct me if I'm wrong, David, they've been pretty supportive of
They are
of this.
supportive, but to get legislation passed, it takes the whole of California to
Right.
do that. And so that's why we've hosted legislative visits, and I've targeted legislators from outside of the San Diego region.
Right.
And when I go to Sacramento, I represent us not as San Diego, but as California, because I got to convince the majority of the legislature if we're going to pass anything. So it's a challenge, but we San Diego have a great reputation within the state.
Right.
So.
And on your end, Jake, what challenges, or are there?
I think to parrot what Pete was saying, I think there's a lot of challenges. It's hyper local here. There's a lot of challenges with. You guys talked about it with manpower challenges initially. I think about 75% of the Navy is perpetually on their first tour. So these 19 to 24-year-olds will do one tour and then get out and go look somewhere else. And a lot of times that's outside of San Diego. That's outside of the local economy for all the reasons we know about: high cost of living, infrastructure issues, tax burdens, all that stuff. So I think the good work that SDMAC is doing to try to eliminate or reduce the effect of some of those burdens on forming initial organizations and basing them in San Diego, or like the Saronic type situations where they go found the company in Austin, Texas, and then they have an outreach here, a branch to do testing and evaluation here in San Diego. Some of that stuff makes sense. Sometimes it makes sense to stay here, like Harpoon chose to do, and make sure we're close to the customer. But there's a lot of structural issues that we could do better. I think there's a lot of states that are picking up big chunks of the defense tech dollars flowing into that defense tech ecosystem right now, because they're offering incentives and workforce development programs that California has either not offered or done a poor job of advertising how they're offering it.
Yeah, and that's half at least in my field, exposure and promoting and getting the word out 4 billion times is important. And I think what's been great, David, on these 3 different separate interviews we've had is that the cohesion and the collaboration, from the folks, Pete and Jake, and of course our universities, and then the folks we had first, is that heaven forbid you actually row in the same direction. What a shock, and see what's going on. And really kudos to you, David. We're getting this innovation group together, and continuing to move forward on this is only going to benefit, obviously, military and so forth, but what Pete and Jake are doing in the universities as well. And keeping our very talented students in San Diego is going to be something that's real critical. Any final comments you got, David?
Well, it's all teamwork here, and we heard from 3 groups now about the focus on innovation, and it also ties back to our number one SDMAC priority to create an environment to retain and attract veterans in California, and specifically to San Diego. Feeds right into the potential workforce of the future through the universities where they need that kind of training. And so it's connecting the dots, and that's what we're trying to do, is connect the dots to make our community a better place to be.
And when you get the investors like Jake and his team and so forth that will really do the hard work in making sure where we're going in this, and then funding these that makes sense. Absolutely, there's the home run in it. Well, so Pete Mirisola, thank you so much, and
Thank you.
Jake
Appreciate
Windle,
you.
appreciate the great content that you have given us. Our audience, I guarantee, will be the beneficiary of this. I'm Drew Schlossberg of Cloudcast Media and co-host with David Boone of our Mission San Diego Military Podcast, brought to you by American Military University. And to our audience, we hope you enjoyed the interview.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mission San Diego Military, presented by American Military University, an educational leader for active duty military, veterans, and their families. Mission San Diego Military is produced by the San Diego Military Advisory Council in partnership with Cloudcast Media, the national leader in local podcasting. We're sure you learned quite a bit about why San Diego is America's finest military city. Please like, subscribe, and share the show.
Cloudcast Media.